So welcome in, everybody. Welcome to Studio B. If you're not familiar with this beautiful community that you're coming into, Studio B is a global well tech company. And you've probably mentioned, as I've welcomed people in, that there truly are people from all over the globe that are tuning into this conversation right now. So I hope you're feeling that connection, not just locally, but all around. Studio B is cultivating collective well-being. We're really emphasizing both personal and professional aspects of what it means to be well. This interview is a part of our bi-monthly interview series, and today we have the pleasure of having Kathryn Thomas with us. And Kathryn is a beloved friend of mine. So for me, it's like I get to just talk with my friend for an hour and have some other beloveds looking in on us. I want to give a little bit of background about Kathryn so that you know who it is we're welcoming into our conversation today. So Kathryn, she is currently the executive director and founder of Yoga for Change that is based out of Jacksonville, Florida. She is also on the management team of ANAMAR Environmental Consulting. Prior to those two roles, as if that's not amazing enough, she was a Naval Aviator with the United States Navy. She suffered a disabling injury with the Navy and found herself no longer flying helicopters, and also dealing with multiple levels of pain on a daily basis. While her husband was on deployment, Kathryn studied to become a yoga teacher with the Yoga School of Kailua. And then when they moved to Jacksonville, Florida, Kathryn really recognized that there was this need for mental, emotional, and physical healing in this new community. And so she, as you will find out, had this idea, brought it to fruition, and created Yoga for Change. Yoga for Change started in Jacksonville, and over the course of the last few years has now expanded across the entire state of Florida, has had partnerships with Boston University. Like, it's amazing what this organization has done. And then in her role with ANAMAR, Kathryn focuses on the business development and the marketing of the company. I do want to say on a personal level, she has a beautiful marriage. She has a little girl about the same age as my daughter, who is an absolute joy. She loves dogs, and she is a huge Buffalo Bills fan. So she's a well-rounded person in every way that you could say that. I want to start this conversation from a place that I think most really great conversations start, which is from a place of gratitude. And I want to just speak really directly to Kathryn and just say how grateful that I am that she's in my life. And I also want to illustrate my gratitude through a story really quick. Kathryn and I, the very first time that we met each other, and we've actually haven't discussed this, so I don't even know if you remember this. We met at a teacher gathering because we were part of a startup for a brand new studio in Jacksonville, Florida. And all the teachers were getting together for a meet and greet. And we happened to sit next to each other. At that point, both of our daughters were really young. Like Bela Boo was still in like a traveling car seat. I think she was like a handful of months old. And A wasn't much older than that either. And Kathryn looked over at me and she, with those big brown eyes, and she said, "So what's your story?" And I remember, you know, sometimes people will ask you like, "How are you doing?" And you know that what they really just want you to say is, "I'm fine, I'm good," and move on. And then there are sometimes people ask you a question like that and you can tell this person really wants to know how I'm doing. And when Kathryn looked at me and she said, "So what's your story?" I had this moment where I realized she really wants me to answer that question. She actually wants to know what my story is. And then we sat there and we talked for like an hour, and she just kind of held space. And it was, I mean, we went really deep right away. So thank you for being a person from literally the very first moment. I was like, I love this woman. So yeah.
Thank you for having me on. First of all, I'm really honored to be a part of this, and I'm so proud to know you and all you have accomplished. As you've shifted and had to resettle and restart, and shift again and restart. I think that who you are is an inspiration to me personally, And I'm so grateful I got to meet you because my favorite classes are the yin that you teach, and we can just settle into who we are as humans, but also really deal with our lives on our mat. So thank you. I'm very honored. And now my new question, as opposed to, so tell me your story, because that can just, sometimes I'm not really ready to hear when people answer that. Now my question is, how are you sleeping? Because for me, again, if I really just want to do that first layer, how are you? A lot of people say, oh, I'm good, I'm fine, everything's great over here, don't ask again, kind of thing. But how are you sleeping? For me, is actually opened up a lot of deeper conversations with people that I never thought would go there. And it also really tells you a lot about, for me at least, where they are. Because it's great to be sleeping well. Everyone really wants to sleep well, but I don't know about anybody else. But the last couple of weeks, I've been sort of up and down in my sleeping habits. So, yeah.
What do you do to sleep well? What is like your practice to help you get to sleeping well?
Lately, I have actually been using the Apple function on the iWatch that says it is time for you to start winding down, and I do that 2 hours before I want to sleep. And that's why I take my watch off and I charge it so it can go, just take it off, take the phone off, put it away. I do a slow movement, sort of a restorative, maybe not really yin because it's not, a longer hold, it's a more restorative practice. And then I do yoga nidra meditations. And I don't necessarily have a problem falling asleep, but for me, it's staying asleep and then getting back to sleep is where I have an issue. I am a survivor of military sexual trauma. And so I do wake up from night terrors. I had one actually last night. So I understand the power of sleep in a really deep level. And I've learned not to beat myself up if I don't go back to sleep, right? I just kind of live with what is, and I just accept that's who I am, kind of thing. But are you sleeping? How are you sleeping?
It's so funny that I love this question. I feel like I might start integrating this and my talks with people. It's really powerful. As you know, I deal with sometimes pretty debilitating anxiety, which often shows itself up at the most at night. And I have some traumas as well. And I don't know how I've developed it, but I've developed the skill to be able to sometimes wake myself up from dreams that are really harmful, where I can tell myself in the dream, like, this isn't real. This isn't actually happening. And I can get myself up. But then once I'm awake, my nervous system is spiraling. I'm often sweating. Sometimes I'm shaking. And mantra's been really big for me. So I have certain mantras like, my body is calm, I am safe. My body is calm, I am safe. And literally just saying that in my head and just like putting my hand on my husband's arm, just having some sort of like anchor to put that energy. And he's so earthy. He's so like heavy and grounded. But yeah, I've been working through some of that recently. So yeah, that's where I am.
Yeah, I last night I do this thing where, I mean, we could talk about this. I could talk about sleep forever because I just feel as though it really does tell a big story of where someone is. I will actually shift the position that I am in the bed. So sometimes my husband will wake up and I'll be like, he'll be we'll be head to foot, right? Like, so I'll like have actually shifted a couple of times. Cause for me, it's just like okay, that is where I had that dream or that anxiety. So I'm just going to move out of that, and physically actually moving for me allows me to, relax a little bit deeper, and then immediately, yes. And I just saw in the chat, somebody has a weighted blanket. I got that from Christmas from my husband a couple years ago, and I love it. But the problem for me is that can be terrifying also, like waking up and being weighted down. And so to fall asleep, it's great, but sometimes that'll actually help. But it's, I'll try anything 3 times. See if it works, right? Like that's what my daughter, she's very picky with eating. And so we asked her, did you try it? And she said, yes, I still don't like it. I'm like, well, try it 3 times because you really don't know if you like it until you've tried it, a couple of times. You got to get through that fear of the green broccoli the color and then you got to put it in your mouth. So yeah, I'll try. You're right. I feel like I need to bring that out again because it's away right now, but thank you.
Yeah. Often for me, it's, I get the heart racing and all of that. And if I can put the front of my body, the anterior of my body in contact with something, so whether that's a large pillow or laying on my belly for a little bit, I actually have a bolster by my bed that sometimes I'll put in and lay over, because sometimes if I can just get the front of my body to relax, then I can start to shift my nervous system into that more relaxed place. But okay, so I want to talk a little bit. There's two things that I want to bring up with Yoga for Change. And the first is, I want for people that are on this call that don't have any experience with Yoga for Change, first of all, to name that the 4 in Yoga for Change is not the word FOR, it's the number 4. And so I'd love for you to talk us through, what does that 4 represent? How did you end up at that number 4? Yeah, talk us through that.
Great. So I founded Yoga for Change in 2014, and at that time, I was struggling. I just been getting on the Navy, and I was attempting to find myself again, because I had assumed that I was put on this earth to fly helicopters for the Navy, but obviously, when they told me I couldn't fly anymore, I had to like reestablish my who I was as a person, and so yoga really allowed me to stop wanting to harm my own body, and actually allowed me to accept the physical limitations I now had on my leg, because I fell and I broke my ankle and surgeries just didn't go very well. And long story short, I can no longer fly helicopters. And so when I founded Yoga for Change, and it's actually worse now, to be honest with you, but the return to jail rate, the recidivism rate in Florida was about 33%. And that's of the people that they were tracking. And so that's pretty high in our state. And on top of that, youth who are getting involved in the correctional system had a higher propensity to return or be forever involved in the carceral system. And so my training at Yoga School of Kailua brought me inside a prison. My husband actually remembers he was on deployment in the middle of the sea in China, and he got an email from me that said, okay, I'm going to go teach in Halava prison now with Lou. And please imagine, my yoga teacher is over the age of 80 now. So she was, late 70s then. A wonderful, compact woman who was a powerhouse. And so Ross, my husband, just imagined me walking into this prison with me, towering over Lou and just being like, okay, we're going to do yoga now. So it's kind of a funny thing, because what is he going to say? He said, like, what was I supposed to say back? Like, no, I'm in the middle of the sea, right? Like so when we moved here, I wanted to continue that mission. So that's kind of like the setup. I was really inspired by the work of the Yoga School of Kailua. And when we moved here, knowing the youth rate with getting involved in the carceral system and the fact that incarcerated individuals are highly, foreseen to return back to being incarcerated and being a veteran. So those are the 3 populations right away, right? That's just easy for me to kind of get involved in. But when I started teaching my incarcerated, my first facility, a lot of them are struggling with substance abuse, a lot. And so they kept asking, how do we maintain contact with this practice that we know is working right now while we're inside when we get out? And so that's where the 4th population at that time came. So it was individuals who are struggling with substance use disorder or opioid use disorder. So veterans, incarcerated individuals, youth, and individuals struggling with substance use. When COVID happened, we had a lot of partner organizations who we partnered with reach out and say, we really want to give some resources to our employees because we're seeing a decrease in employee productivity, an increase in mental health, awareness. But we really want to give something because people are struggling with COVID and being home, and we need them to work still selfishly. Do you recommend this program? And so we as an organization saw this need, and because it didn't fit in our mission at the time, we actually rewrote our mission to now be individuals with mental health struggles. So it's veterans, people who are involved in the carceral system or the court system, youth, and individuals with mental health struggles. Because really, for me, well, I mean, I'm a veteran, right? So like I do fit in the mold, but I felt after COVID, everybody was struggling with their mental health for some reason, right? Like maybe they were having a little bit more anxiety or stress, or maybe they were, not connecting with their partner as well. So we wanted to ensure that we were meeting all our students where they are, as opposed to only some of them. And so, yeah, so now we have those are our 4 populations. I think I answered the question. Like,
you absolutely answered my question.
I
love that rewrite. That rewrite has happened obviously since I left Yoga for Change. Because for those of you that don't know on the call, I was a teacher with Yoga for Change for a period of time, a little over a year.
Yes.
And I taught in one of the rehab facilities a number of times. And then my primary teaching was at an all-girls youth detention center. So I did work with Yoga for Change, but that particular rewrite has happened since I departed from Yoga for Change. And I really like that inclusive language. And I think it really aptly represents the shift that has happened in the past 12 months or so.
Yes.
I think one of the things that really drew me to Yoga for Change very early on, because you may or may not know, but like our paths sort of crossed at a time where my own teaching was in a pretty heightened state of evolution. I was trying to figure out like, okay, I know that I'm called to primarily teach things that translate off the mat, but wasn't sure how to make that fit in the mold of a 60 or 75-minute yoga class. Mm-hmm. So the theming was relatively new. It was something I was starting to play around with and really was beginning to calcify, but was still very shifty in my own teaching. And then when I came into contact with you and Yoga for Change, one of the things that really drew me in is you guys have a very theme-based curriculum that you operate off of. And it's very organized. There's a structure that you flow through. And yet it felt so universal at the same time. And one of those entire curriculum is all about honoring story. And so I guess I would be interested to know, like, how did you land at a place where you thought like, we need to do more than just walk in and show up and teach a generic yoga class, where you feel like we need to do something in a little bit more structured way, and maybe theming would really help us be more impactful? How did you land there?
So what I didn't want to do is tell powerful yoga teachers which asana or which postures to teach, right? And so what Yoga for Change does is we do not tell you which postures to teach or which practice you can teach, because every yoga teacher that teaches for Yoga for Change or in studios, they're called to teach that type of yoga because that's what changed their lives. And so I wanted to ensure that yoga teachers were able to bring their spark, right? I don't know if you've seen the movie Soul, but yes, I recommend the movie Soul. Like, I don't even...
Many of the teachers on Studio B have seen it, and we've all recommended it to each other.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Like, it was like speaking to me. I loved it. The teachers had their spark, right? Like, they taught fantastic yin or fantastic Baptiste yoga or fantastic Ashtanga, or they had, vinyasa flow. And so we wanted to ensure that they were able to incorporate it, but we wanted there to be something unique about Yoga for Change. And so I'm still very into Brene Brown. I was super into Brene Brown's book about vulnerability. And so that helped with formulate the first curriculum, which is a 6-week curriculum that focuses and talks about vulnerability. And then based on the lacks or the holes in that curriculum is how we decided to come up with Honoring Story. And that one we created for children who, one specific facility, KIPP Impact Middle School, you had some kids who had experienced extreme trauma, and you had some kids who didn't necessarily experience extreme trauma, but were vicariously affected. And so how do we ensure that both people's stories are they're as important and nobody feels less than or more than based on their own lives? And that's really where we came with Honoring Story. And because we were able to have a theme, we were then able to partner and then take out sort of the variables, if you will, to get studied. So a lot of yoga people continue to come back to yoga because of that yoga bubble that they feel at the end of practice, right? I feel more grateful. I feel more grounded. I feel more self-compassion. I feel as though I can name the emotions that are now in my body. In order to get to those conclusions, we had to take out all the variables. And the variables wasn't the different yoga practices. The variables were music wasn't played, right? Because a lot of people play different music. uniform was really clear. And so what our organization did was we stripped out the excess and we're able to really focus on what is actually happening on the yoga mat that can be scientifically proven, so that not only will our curriculum be validated, but basically the whole yoga sector will be validated and will lift everybody up, right? Because although we're teaching it one way, obviously everyone on this call knows I did not create yoga, right? All I did was I just got our teachers to agree to teach these specific themes and these orders based on scientific research and evidence-based practices. And then we're able to set it up where we're meeting our students where they are, no matter where they are. And I think that is a little different kind of flip from a studio to teaching, incarcerated individuals, because studio, you show up, you call downward facing dog, everyone just does it. They just do it. They do exactly what you say. If you call downward facing dog in a jail, for instance, some people might do it, but some people might not do it. And some people might throw their block at you too. So you got to really get it. You got to be really attuned to what's happening in the room, but also you have to be attuned to how these themes will land on your students. So we had, am I okay to keep going?
Yeah, I'm actually, the one thing I want to ask is, can you actually name the first 6 themes? I know it starts with gratitude, but the first curriculum that has the 6 classes.
Yep. Gratitude, self-acceptance, peer pressure, bullying, forgiveness, expectations, and vulnerability. Yeah. So one of the classes that I was going to teach to a female incarcerated group of women was forgiveness, right? And so they're in that order. They can be taken individually, but they obviously grow the longer you're in the curriculum. And I just heard on the news the day before that there was a horrible, tragic accident, and a family was passed away due to a horrible, horrible fire. So I walked into the facility, and upon walking in, I found out that the woman who was in part of my class, that was her family. So to these women, to talk about forgiveness at that point, I have to understand how the themes could potentially come across or be accepted. And I also understand trauma and how this might not be the best thing to do. So without letting anyone know, obviously I shifted the theme to expectations, right? Because that actually was less hard for us to discuss, but also it wasn't so clearly coming at that student. Because part of our programming, which is really unique to Yoga for Change, is students are actually sentenced to participate in our program as part of their incarceration. And that's a relationship we have with the 4th Circuit of Florida. And so people are actually, as opposed to being sentenced to anger management or domestic violence classes, or, there's a lot of different programs that are approved to be offered in incarcerated facilities, they're taking yoga. And so what that does is, for taxpayer money, one, they're taking yoga and then they get out earlier, right? So they've actually been offered, the judge said, you can either be a year incarcerated or you could take 6 yoga classes. And so that's 6 weeks versus a year. Now, obviously not everyone said, I'll take yoga, right? Which we did actually have people choose incarceration over yoga, which is, for me, man, that's a really bad choice. But right, it's a choice. You still have a choice in the whole situation. And those students that show up, a lot of people think oh, they're super resistant. They totally are, but they're also the biggest buy-in afterwards, right? Because if they come in and they say, I was sentenced to this, and then they actually release that stress and anxiety and feel their bodies in a new way while incarcerated, they become our biggest advocates about the program while incarcerated. And we know that they're able to start to heal their trauma while on the mat based on the evidence and research, which allows them to be better humans, if you will, when they are released, as opposed to trying to figure out how to be better humans without yoga. And then when they get released, reintegrating back into their families and communities, we want to teach them skills so that they can reintegrate back, so that they don't come back into prison, so they don't go back to the high risk behaviors. So being theme-based is great because more teachers are able to teach for us. And again, we didn't create anything new, right? We just got themes that we knew would work for the various populations and put them together in a curriculum. So
yeah, I love that. Well, and it was such a time of alignment for me because as you know, I teach on a lot of those themes as well. They really resonate for me. I want to pivot a little bit and talk about, at Studio B, the whole month of January, we've been focusing a lot on this concept of beginning again. And for teachers on the platform, we've tried to develop content that speaks to this idea of beginning again, and it's something we've echoed the whole month. When I think about you, I think about, okay, you've been handed many situations in your life where you've been forced to begin again, not necessarily by choice, whether that was leaving the Navy and having to figure out life on the other side of that, or all of us with COVID. I think about you are a mother by choice through adoption. And so that was a choice that you made to begin that process of becoming a mother. And then you began Yoga for Change. And yet now, for those of you that don't know, you're a few months away from leaving Yoga for Change and doing this huge pivot, not only physically moving to a different part of the country, but sort of redefining who you are, what your purpose is, what you're doing. And that's a beginning that you've very much chosen for yourself. And so I'm interested to know, this is kind of two-pronged. One is I'm wondering, because you speak to this a lot when you teach, like, what do beginnings feel like to you in your body? Is there any sort of like somatic experience that you move through when you're moving with a beginning? And for you, is there any difference between beginnings that have kind of been handed to you, forced upon you, versus those that are self-chosen? Big question.
Yeah, I mean, we had like this earlier discussion this week, and that was not what the question was you asked, but it's a really good one. I think endings, I can talk about endings and how it feels for like to being told you will never fly helicopters again, right? Like for me, it feels like the floor is pulled out from under me, and you're falling. And I don't know if you've ever walked off a curb and thought that it was lower than it actually, and it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to hit the floor, but the way down is kind of, there's a little bit of fear there, right? For me. So endings that are unforeseen have been really difficult for me to deal with. And getting stuck in that spiral of why me, that also has happened to me in the past. And I don't know who said this, but it wasn't me who said this. It was a teacher of mine that said, everything isn't happening to you. Everything is just happening. And so that's sort of something that I've taken in, that everything's not just happening to me. Everything's just happening, right? Everyone's in COVID land right now, not just me. And I think that that's an easy reminder that I might be super overwhelmed and underwater, but there's somebody out there in the world who's feeling just like me. So there's a connection point there. There's been a huge difference in being told I would never fly again, and then actually realizing that I've come to the end of my capacity and capabilities for this organization. So Yoga for Change, when I started it, had 6 classes per week. And I was the only teacher, and the board was me and my dad and my husband. And votes like, you agree? Yes, no? Like that was how we did our voting system. And now we have a board of 10 people, 8 employees, over 50 contractors across the state of Florida. So that should show in almost 7 years. We're almost turning 7. We've grown pretty quickly. And I flew helicopters. I have not gone to any sort of how to make this nonprofit work school, right? It's been sort of on the job training. And I foresaw I don't want to be the reason Yoga for Change isn't able to grow, because more people need yoga everywhere, and we have a way to get it. So choosing my ending is refreshing, which is totally different than being told that it's done. Beginning for me, sometimes getting out of bed is a struggle, right? Like that is the harder beginning of getting out of bed, just with my history. I have a fantastic partner who allows beginnings and endings just to not be as dramatic, I guess, as they potentially could be. But and I think that I am a resilient human, and I believe that with my history, I am not able to see that the world is still happening to me, that it's just the world happening. And I think that shift in mindset has really affected the way that I interact with endings and beginnings.
Yeah.
So there obviously is fear, right? Like I don't want to disclaim and say that I'm totally okay and everything's cool, calm, collected. There's a little bit of anxiety and fear there. And knowing that everything will be all right. I mean, everything's going to work out the way it's supposed to is sort of a calming way to ground yourself. And
You said something to me several months ago in one of our phone conversations that's really stuck with me. And I don't know if it's your quote or if it's something you got from someone else and just shared with me. You said that retention is just as much a part of the breath as the inhale and the exhale. And I've thought a lot about that idea that the stillness, the pause in between the actions, the place that's in between is just as much a part of breath, of life, of the cycle, all of it, as the inhale and the exhale. And it seems to me when we talk about beginnings and endings, like the beginning might be the inhale, the ending might be the exhale, and yet there's this space of retention in between, which to me is where the clarity happens. It's where you kind of figure out where the next right thing is in that space of retention. So again, I don't know if that quote was yours or someone else's, but it landed like right there and has really stuck with me. Yeah.
I think that Matthew Sanford, I'm pretty sure that's got to be a Matthew Sanford quote. Anything really smart and important, I wish I could claim, but I have been privileged to study with outstanding teachers who have forever impacted me. And I think it resonated also, that specific quote resonated with me also because sometimes I can really get hard on myself if I'm not breathing as part, when the teacher calls inhale, if I'm not inhaling and exhaling when the teacher calls exhale. And so knowing that all sections of the breath are still as good as the other sections of the breath sort of stops leveling where we are, in our yoga practice. Obviously that's way in the behind the scenes of Kathryn's brain, but yeah, it's when you get a nugget, right, that sticks with you, it kind of reaffirms what you're doing with your life, right?
Yeah, totally. Well, and it seems like in some ways we've kind of been in a space of retention for 10 months. We've been in this space of pause, of figuring out what comes next, what the other side of this is going to look like. And so it seems to me there can be this sensation of you can resist the retention, you can push it away, you can almost create a fear response in yourself, or you can say, okay, sort of what you were saying earlier, like this is what is here right now, this is what is happening right now, and allow that space to provide you some clarity and some direction and some insight on what happens next. It's also, to me, a space where you kind of return to your own sense of agency a little bit. Yeah.
I also think that if you think about the breath, and then you can kind of go through, and this might be a little bit too far out there, but for me, I'm not able to think about my feelings when I'm breathing in or breathing out. I'm really only able to identify and have that emotional intelligence when I'm either holding my breath in or after holding my breath out, right? So feeling fully full or feeling empty. Because if I'm in action, that's my way of sort of hiding from whatever thoughts or emotions are going in my head. But if you have to be still and you're actually trying to focus on that retention part, for me, that's where I'm able to actually see what are you actually feeling right now? Oh, okay.
Yeah, and like to me, if you kind of lift up out of that, the 5,000 feet view of that is like, okay, if I look at that in my day, most of my day is action oriented. It's some version of an inhale or an exhale. I'm doing something for my kids. I'm doing something for my husband. I'm practicing. Am I taking the moment to kind of sit down and actually be in relationship with what is here?
Mm.
That's a version of like the lived retention. Yeah, I like that. That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
What's bringing you joy right now?
Ooh. Well, today, we get vegetables from a farm delivered.
Mm.
And this week, I got biscotti delivered, fresh made, and putting a biscotti in a cup of coffee is luxury, to be honest. I just literally had that before this call. That was just a afternoon cup of coffee with a nice homemade biscotti. That's bringing me joy. Below that, being able to exhale. I feel like I've been holding my breath for a really long time, and actually being able to exhale and to be okay with, like, I can get through this day, and knowing my internal power and resiliency, that right now today is bringing me joy also. And dog kisses. Those
Mhm.
are those are the three things today.
I
So
love that. I love that.
what about you?
Dancing. I've been doing a lot of dancing. Um, I dance by myself. I dance with my kids. My husband doesn't really dance. He just secretly films us dancing. But no, I really love moving my body. I think for me, I've actually only in the last year kind of returned to at-home dance parties. And for those of you that don't know, I grew up dancing. My mom was a professional ballet dancer, and so I grew up dancing from like the time I could walk. I was supposed to dance in college and had an injury that did not allow me to do that, thankfully. um, but it was hard for me to come back to my body in that way. And so at-home dance parties have been this return to intuitive movement, to this like inner like knowing, to trusting that my body knows how to move in a way that makes it feel good and joyful and happy, and to have no judgment attached to it. So that's been a huge source of joy for me. And I have a cup of tea every afternoon between 1 and 2 p.m. And it is like my midday pause. And I look forward to it every day. It's just a landing place for me in my day. And my husband got home early from work yesterday, and we had like 2 hours just us in the house, and we didn't really do anything. We just like hung out on the couch and read books, and we had a few conversations. And I looked at him at one point and I said, I really like you. And it's this really good feeling that like 15 years in, and like I still really like this person that I choose to be with every day. I like him outside of the children that we created. So yeah, that's a really nice source of joy as well.
Yeah.
Do you want to guide us through a practice? Actually, let me ask two things. Is there anything else you want to share about your life, what you're doing, anything that's risen up for this conversation that you want to circle back to? Yeah.
I mean, Yoga for Change is currently looking for a new executive director. So if you have business acumen and you are called to lead this work, like, please do reach out. Like, seriously, please do reach out. I mean, we are in the hiring process right now, still searching, but my last day is April 30th. So I want to watch it from the sidelines and cheer the organization on, because I mean, it was always supposed to be bigger than me, which is why I started a nonprofit and not a for-profit. So I'm very excited to see. And I am still maintaining my job with ANAMAR Environmental Consulting. And so that is why we are moving to the West Coast, Oregon, Hood River area, to start offices out there for my other companies. So I got to tell my daughter, who I love, that mommy is no longer doing her yoga job, that she's just doing her ANAMAR job, and she knows the difference. And then Adeline goes, well, what are you going to do with all your time? My daughter's name's Adeline. And I said, like, you get to become my number one priority. Not that she hasn't been, but like, she is aware that mommy works at night and on the weekends and, doing this. And so what's next for me is, my biggest worry being, should we pack apples or oranges for ballet?
Yeah.
Like, because that has never been, that is not my current biggest worry. And that for me is what I'm most looking forward to. That is something somebody asked me, what are you going to get off your bucket list in 2021? And for me, I don't have a bucket list right now. I literally I've done a lot that I wanted to do, but I haven't been able to be the best mom that I possibly can. And yes, Rachel, Hood River is fabulous. I'm very excited to move there. But to fall back in love with her again and every day again and again, I'm really looking forward to that. So that's something that I'm really looking forward to. That's a new beginning. Kathryn as a mom, like, and only having one job as opposed to Kathryn as a mom with 2 jobs and doing too much. So working on clearing out right now, which is good.
Yeah.
So
I am going to invite you to lead us through a practice, but I think we'll probably land in a really like a yoga bubble at the end of that. So I want to open up if there's any questions for people that are in on this conversation with us to ask maybe before we move into the practice segment. So
great.
Floor is open for anyone. Anybody?
I have a question for how is it that you engaged in the correctional facility to get this program of yoga in there and to have it sort of certified for people to be able to do? Because I'm sure that was quite a process.
That is a great question. So before I moved from Hawaii, I emailed and just happened to get the right person on the other side of the line. So very by luck initially. And I was professional and I showed up and I was on time. I was professional because a lot of the correctional facilities and also the veteran facilities, when you ask them if you can teach yoga, a lot of them assume that, and this is a completely wrong stereotype, but a lot of them assume that you will have like dreadlocks and you'll be showing up with like wavy, beautiful clothes, and you'll open the door and incense will, come before you, and then you'll walk in and you present. And that is literally what they told me. So they said, please come in what you plan to teach. And so at that point, we didn't have a uniform. So I wore my husband's jeans and my husband's high neck shirt. And I showed up and I looked like a form that was going to teach the practice of yoga, as opposed to what they imagined in their minds, which was, great because that works in a studio environment, but showing up that way would not be appropriate for incarcerated men and women. Right. And I didn't give up because another prison that I got to work in, I called him every Tuesday at 9:47 a.m. And finally the warden answered and he said, Kathryn, you are the most persistent person I've ever known. And I said, I'll take that as a compliment. Your guys need yoga. Right. So the issue is that I was very lucky that I had a partner who was going to support me to get Yoga for Change off the ground. Very privileged to be able to do that, to not really have to pay myself for 3 years just because I was in the Navy, he was in the Navy, and then I got out kind of thing. So that was the first thing. But the second recommendation is don't give up. Like a no, unless they tell you no, they haven't told you no yet. So keep calling, keep going, and just keep speaking about what yoga has done for you. Because everybody wants to feel better. And if you keep saying that we're going to help these individuals feel better, or we have, this is what's happening, it'll be easier now that there's more research, so that will help lift up. And if you need any resources, please do reach out, info@y4c.org. I'll put that in the chat because that would be really, I would love to help anybody who wants to bring this into more facilities, because it's a needed resource. I mean, we know it is. So.
Anyone else before we shift to practice? Kathryn's a pretty open book, so.
Yeah. Well, if there's any questions that they haven't asked and they want to ask after, I put it seems like it's a general email. I mean, I'm the one that checks that email. So if you email that, it'll be coming to me. So feel free to ask any questions that you can. Sorry that all my notifications are going off. Please just email me.
Yes. let's let you shift into a practice, kind of ground us at the end of this conversation.
Awesome. So we're going to do a breathing practice, and I actually shifted it after we talked about the retention portion. So it is going to be a 4-part breathing series. And so what you're going to do is just to kind of go over it first, you will inhale for a count of 4. You're going to hold your breath in for a count of 4, so you'll feel very full. And then you're going to exhale for a count of 4 and then hold it out for a count of 4. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. But before we begin, sort of just be a more trauma-informed model, just take a look around you. Just notice where the doors are, just so that as you're breathing, if something was, if somebody was to come in, you would have an awareness of where that door is. Even if it's your own house, just kind of notice there might be a coffee mug that's about to fall, just to make sure you're aware. And then everybody just breathe in and bring your shoulders up to your ears. Exhale, let them go. Inhale, bring your shoulders up to your ears. Exhale, let them go. Last one, inhale, bring your shoulders up to your ears. Maybe this time you make fists and tighten all the muscles in your arms. Inhale, inhale, and exhale, release. Bring attention to your jaw. Notice if it's clenched. Notice if your tongue is on your upper palate. Allow your whole mouth just to fully release and to let that tension go. And notice everything that's touching either the floor or your chair. Just notice that sensation. Take a preparatory breath in and a preparatory breath out. And begin. Inhale for 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Again, inhale, 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 inhale. Hold. Feel your body be full. Exhale, 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 exhale. Feel your body be empty. Again, in breath, in breath, in breath, in breath. Hold. What do you feel? Empty, 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 empty. Hold. Again, inhale, 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 inhale. Hold. Empty, 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 empty. Hold. On your own twice. As you inhale in, feel your inhales. As you hold your breath, experience what you feel as you hold. And as you exhale, allow your breath to fully leave your body. And as you sit in empty, notice what you feel as you sit in empty. Last time on your own, inhale. Hold your breath. Release, 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 release. Hold. Allow your body to breathe itself in. And open up your mouth, exhale fully. If your eyes have closed, keep them closed. If they're open, that's fine. And then as you sit here, on your next breath, can you actually breathe in the sensation of joy? And then you hold that sensation of joy in. And then you get to exhale and send that joy out into the world. When you're ready, bring your hands to your heart center. Press your hands together. I'm so grateful to be here with you all. When you're ready, open up your eyes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate Studio B facilitating, a conversation with one of my best friends. So it was very kind of Studio B. Yeah. No, in all sincerity, I love you. I appreciate you. I'm grateful to live in a time and an era where we coexist together and we get to do this work side by side. And I look forward to being in your physical presence. It's going to happen in the next 12 to 18 months.
Yes.
Again, that's what I'm going to say.
Keep saying it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kathryn. Everyone knows how to contact Kathryn, info@y4c.org. So if questions come up afterwards, that's where you can contact her. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Yeah, grateful for you all.
Thank you. Have a fantastic rest of your day. I see you all. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Good deal.